Hello, Intuitive Pool community. There's a few things that I'd like to say on the podcast today. And I'm saying them from a really soft energy that I have woken up with today. Often when I'm on this podcast, I feel the frequency of fire and conviction. Today, I feel the frequency of softness and conviction in that softness. There's a few things that have happened over the last few days that I know have contributed to me feeling this softness. And I want to speak, move, touch a softness within you, maybe a sense of acceptance within you, maybe even a sense of surrender within you. I'll start with the softness that was activated in me directly after something I did yesterday. Yesterday, I interviewed Jannine Gearon for the third time. And Jannine is someone that I interviewed in May and June earlier this year because she was inspired very generously to share the process that she went through to go down the voluntary assisted dying route because of very severe cancer that she has, bile duct cancer. There's a more technical name than that, but essentially it's a very aggressive cancer called in the bile duct. And you may or may not have watched yesterday's episode, but essentially she was sharing that at the 11th hour, a miracle in terms of the orchestration, in terms of the timing, in terms of the efficacy, a miracle occurred in that her sister found a trial drug. And then when Jannine had spoken to her doctor and seen if she was eligible for it, which only 1 in 5 people have the genomic mutation to be able to be eligible for it. Jannine happened to be one of those ones. And at the same time, it was no longer a trial drug. It was now on the PBS, or it wasn't being sold as a trial drug. It was now on the PBS, and it was now affordable, rather than, I think it was like $18,000 a medication. The short of it is that the medication has arrested the cancer, maybe has even not only stopped it in its tracks, but maybe has even begun to reverse it. I published Jannine's episode last night, and I watched it myself this morning, and I just went into such a place of, as I said, softness has really been activated in me today, and such a place of humility. And I have been presencing these frequencies and allowing them to move me today. And it's very incredible that I normally have many sessions on Tuesdays, but it seems that God, the universe, didn't want that for me today. God, Mother Nature, the universe wanted me to have space to be in this softness and to be in this humility today and to allow it to work its magic. And so therefore, it has moved me to be on this podcast with you today. The second thing that happened, which made me feel overflowing in not only gratitude, but in satisfaction, was the Miracle Frequency Masterclass that I delivered last Thursday and Friday. And I hadn't delivered a masterclass in quite a few months, but I had delivered quite a few masterclasses at the end of last year and the beginning of this year. And I have to say that this masterclass was a real blessing, because as I spoke out what I had seen that contributes to us embodying the frequency of miracles, as Jannine has just experienced, I felt such an embodiment of everything that I spoke to. Everything that I spoke to, that I have traveled, and I really documented it back till March, April 2023, when I then saw that what had happened since March, April 2023, when I received a download around sacred leadership. And I'll tell you about that in a minute. But what I saw last week that I spoke to in the Miracle Frequency podcast is that from that download around sacred leadership, March and April 2023, everywhere that I have traveled through and to, and everything that I have shared, therefore, with the people that I'm working with, have been the initiation into the Miracle Frequency timeline. So as I was speaking this out loud in the masterclass over those 2 days, there was such a sense of at oneness with what I was speaking about. There was such a sense of embodiment. It lives within me now. I know it. It doesn't exist in my head. I don't have to think about it. I don't have to work it out. It's a full body integration that has occurred over this time. In March, April 2023, I received a download, and that download didn't have soft energy at all, like I feel today, or energy of humility. It had the energy of being demanded and commanded. And I felt like I was being demanded and commanded. This energy of demanding and commanding was coming through me, and ironically asking me to put on center stage the frequencies of sacred leadership, which I defined as being the frequencies of presence, the frequencies of intuition, of trust, of knowing, of letting go of control and surrendering, of faith, of grace, of course, authenticity, and of course, radical responsibility, of course. I was demanded and commanded to put on center stage those frequencies with particular people. This was not a public program. This was a program where I was shown who had the capacity to now lead from and lean into these sacred leadership frequencies. And the people that I saw, that I was shown, most of those people said yes, and we worked together for a year. We actually worked face to face. It was unusual and delicious. People would fly into Sydney once every 3 months, and we'd spend 2 days together, and they were extraordinary. And then we would have time in between. And then I ran a second group, which was an online group based on where people were overseas, later that year. That agreement to lead from and lean into those high vibe frequencies, I now see, in hindsight, of course, because I can see it now that 2 years has passed, or more than 2 years, 2.5 years has passed, I can see that leaning into and leading from those frequencies set off a process of what I'll call the highest order. And the reason why I'm saying that it's set off a process of the highest order is because it allowed us to, or I should say, it invited us to travel to those places within us that are the initiation into having the capacity to fully step into the frequency of miracles. I feel extraordinarily humbled by that initial invitation and what it ended up unfolding, that I'm now here standing in conviction, standing in the capacity to hold myself and those who are ready for it in the frequency of miracles. I have so much gratitude for that. And I have so much gratitude and appreciation for the necessity of tension and pressure needing to be part of the birthing process of a new timeline. And yes, this initiation has brought us onto a new timeline or into a new timeline. A timeline that says, the emotion running through me right now, that says there is nothing that the consciousness of love, teamed up with all of those sacred leadership frequencies, there is nothing that the consciousness of love cannot transform. And it's not always in the way that we prefer, but it's always, and we can only appreciate it if we see it through multidimensional eyes, through the eyes that can see the bigger picture beyond our little human needs and desires, which are important. I'm not diminishing them at all, because those human aches, we have aches, and we want to acknowledge them and appreciate them and love them. And sometimes those aches aren't always met. And if we can hold the miracle being the miracle that is supposed to happen, well, then our experience of life is so much bigger. It's so much full of light. Our capacity is so much bigger to hold the shadow and to see the light that can only come by being in the shadow. Probably the biggest, not probably, the most challenging time I've ever experienced in my life was the time where I was 29 years old and Joshua died at 11 days old, my first boy. And had a beautiful family. I still have a beautiful family. But the person that I was married to was a complete match for my unworthiness that I didn't know I had, and a complete match for my beliefs that I'm unlovable and that I will be rejected, that I didn't know I had. And that's exactly what happened over and over and over again with infidelity, over and over again, and with emotional and physical abuse, over and over again. When I think back to that time, and I've been thinking about that time since I've been in the appreciation that from March, April 2023, when we were being demanded and commanded to go and lean into and lead from those high vibe frequencies, versus like the rehashing of trauma and story, and because all of that actually gets transmuted by leaning and leading into those high vibe frequencies. They just carry us better. They carry our humanity better. They don't exclude our humanity. They don't ignore. They don't bypass our humanity. They have the capacity to actually hold our humanity in its fullness until it's all felt. So because I've been in this appreciation for what that time unfolded, this initiation that we have just been into, to be able to have the capacity to step into the timeline of miracle frequency. I have really gone back to that time, and I've appreciated it, and I've loved myself, actually, because what I had within me at that time, not immediately at that time I was absolutely full of suffering, full of chaos. And it lasted for a few years. And I lost myself in that time. It was only 3 years later that I started to learn about myself, and I started to realize why I had even said yes to a marriage like that. And then, of course, I would have loved with all of my heart, and I did everything that I could for Joshua to live well, because at 18 weeks pregnant, I learnt that he had a diaphragmatic hernia. And at that time, and we were talking 1999, it's a different story now, I'm sure. There was no in utero surgery. And so we had to wait until he was born. And we only had a 7% chance that he would be born with the lungs that he needed to live a perfectly normal life. But I went for it. We went for it. And this was the beginning, actually, of my spiritual journey, because I remember reading my first personal development book, The Power of the Subconscious Mind, and I started learning about meditation and visualization, and I bought all of his clothes, and I, bought his pram, and I made up his room, and, fully putting everything that we had into the creation that he would be well. But it wasn't so. And so whilst I desired with all of my heart, as you have just heard me say, for him to live healthily, it wasn't so. And if I had only held myself by seeing the death of my son through my human eyes, if I had only seen the chaos in my marriage, the rejection in my marriage, the abuse in my marriage, the trauma in my marriage, if I had only seen that through my human eyes, I actually don't think I'd be here now. I'd either be heavily medicated and unwell, or I don't think I'd actually be here in this physical life. I think I would have checked out. That was a miracle. That shift in perception that I had, not at the time. As I said, I suffered for 3 years. And then when I started opening up and I started to connect more deeply, because I had always been intuitive, but I started to connect more deeply to my intuition. And I started to ask what all of that suffering was in purpose to, from a soul level, what my soul had chosen to experience in this lifetime. Only then I was able to see why Joshua had only stayed for 11 days, why I had chosen a man like I had and a marriage like I had. And when I saw it, I was free. And I remember the exact moment where I had that shift in perception, feeling all the feelings that I was feeling, like I was crying a lot. And through those tears and through the ability to see at a soul level why I had experienced what I did, I remember the moment where I finally felt free. It didn't mean that the pain was never there again. it meant that the suffering wasn't there again. And so that really was a time where Miracle Frequency loved me so much that it would create a new timeline for me. And then I met my husband, who I've been married to now for 21 years. And then I had Joel, who's now 19. And then I had Ruby Rose 5 years later. She took a while to come, but she came 5 years later. I was 41 when I had her, with no IVF. The miracle of my husband finding a Chinese doctor. And I remember walking into his surgery, and I sat down and I had tears in my eyes, and I had this strange sense that I felt at home here with him. And then we entered his rooms, and he didn't talk about how old are you, and no historical questions, as if you go to the GP it would have happened. And he looked at our tongue, and he looked at our eyes, and he felt our pulse, and he said this about me, and this about you, Clayton. And then he prescribed all of these natural herbs, and he said I'd be pregnant within 6 months, and I was pregnant in 4. So Miracle Frequency is available to us all. And ironically, because I have this softness inside of me today, I'm not actually expressing an energy, although I am through the demonstration of what I've just said, not actually expressing an energy that we have to embody if we are choosing to step into a new timeline, into a new life. We have to embody that no matter what energy, that I get to choose. I get to have a different experience of myself, no matter how big the tension's been, no matter how big the pressure's been, no matter how unrelenting and unforgiving and the lack or the little reprieve that we're given in all of that pressure and tension. And especially when that pressure and tension has not let up, especially then. And the tension and the pressure might not look like anything to anybody else. It might be completely internal, the experience that you're having with yourself, but on the outside, your life looks normal. Or it might be that there's a whole lot of chaos on the outside of your life. We have to reach that place of power within us that says no matter what is happening now, or no matter what has happened before, I get to choose a different timeline for myself. Whether that timeline is simply the experience, I don't want to say simply, whether that timeline is about the internal experience only, which of course is going to have an outward projection, or whether the catalyst is because of all the chaos and the crisis on the outside. We have to have not the softness within me, right? That's here right now. We have to have that no matter what, I decide, I choose, I get to hand myself over to a process that I do not know how it's going to unfold, and I don't know what is going to happen, but I have faith that in my no matter what choosing, in my no matter what fire, that I'm going to hold this tension and this pressure, and I'm going to feel all of my humanity, and I'm going to hold as best as I can myself in those sacred leadership frequencies of presence and intuition and trust and knowing and surrender and faith and grace and authenticity, and of course, the number one, radical responsibility. That is how we get to enjoy the miracle that we have so been desiring, or the miracles that we have so been desiring, including the miracles that we never saw coming, nor in the way that we saw them coming. So I want to end this podcast episode with this. I have had so much appreciation for the ones who have been holding that amount of pressure and tension, who have been holding that amount of pressure and tension with little reprieve or no reprieve at all, who have been pummeled by that pressure and tension, who have had lots of thoughts and feelings and stories that have been made up and sometimes very well believed in because of that pressure and tension. And yet they haven't given up on themselves. I have so much appreciation for those people, because what I know in absolute conviction is that the greater the tension and the greater the pressure, the greater the light. The more profound the new timeline is. The more powerful the new timeline is. The more impactful the new timeline is. And the more precious the new timeline is. That I know with absolute conviction. And I will stand for those people. I stand for those people. I have the privilege of standing for those people because I've walked it myself. I've walked it myself several times. I have been holding the pressure and the tension since the end of 2022. And I now see what it was all in service to. So I honor if you are the one of the ones who has been chosen to hold the pressure and the tension. And it has been unrelenting, and it has badgered you, it has poked you, it has pummeled you, it has not let up. I honor you because there is a new timeline to be birthed through you. I have this sense that I am being commanded and demanded again. It started poking through yesterday that I am to walk through the threshold of 2025 and 2026 with those who I've spoken to on this podcast. I have this directive coming through in my softness, ironically, that is telling me to honor those who have felt the tension and the pressure as I have been speaking to with you now. And to say, come, let us walk together. I know the way, but you must surrender and you must take radical responsibility. And you must be so present. I have been so present. Daily presence. Every day I've been present, listening, receiving, feeling, appreciating, hurting, sometimes feeling overwhelmed, confused. And I have so much gratitude for the initiation that all of that was, to welcome those who are ready to birth a new timeline through them. From that, no matter what happened before frequency, and through that, no matter what is happening now frequency, it's the only way that a miracle is going to come. The only way. I hope you recognized yourself in my words today. I hope you felt held in the frequency of my softness, and maybe even felt a sense of being able to land in my softness, kind of being able to nestle and surrender into that softness. Maybe there's a sense of, or even a greater sense of trust and faith that has been ignited in my sharing today. And maybe there's even a decision that has just happened or is happening through my words today. You're welcome. I will gladly take your hand and walk across the finishing line, the threshold of 2025 and 2026. I will gladly walk through that threshold with you into the new timeline that is being birthed through the unrelenting pressure and tension that you have been feeling. Follow the pull if it's here. I feel it in my heart as I'm saying this out loud. Heart to heart. Trust it. Surrender into it if it's here. If it's here in this moment, surrender into it in this moment. If it's stirring, allow it to continue to stir and brew. And when it's time to say yes, whether that happens with me and collaborating with me, or in any other way, say yes. Thank you for listening. Thank you for your presence. This was a big episode, all created through my softness, all created through my reverence and my humility for what has unfolded since the moment I allowed myself to be that open channel, to be demanded and commanded to put on center stage those sacred leadership frequencies and the initiation that has unfolded since then. Thank you. Ciao, ciao.